3.3 major project 5. I'm now going to demonstrate a particularly large scale piece that has filtered through some research with the playground, the shapes and form, and also demonstrate how I've been playing with the ideas of changing the silhouette with the body. This piece is actually quite simple in its making, but also an element of quite technical, or not till I realised till the piece was actually finished that in total it took approximately 20 hours. So it has formed quite a lengthy process with its making, its materials, and then concluding with its overall shape. I've continued with the theme of armour. Creativity is my armour, and I see that the creativity protects me. In this piece in particular, I feel as though it's protected, or protecting me when I actually wear the piece. The piece has turned out to be rather heavy, and I feel as though that this could resonate with how armour felt in history once it was all pieced together and worn, to become a piece of defensive mechanism from anything outside. So I took an idea from 3.2, and it was just quite a simple idea by knitting and making some tubes. The tubes have been padded with wadding, and then I've sewn in some strips of thread, and these strips will actually pull and gather, and eventually when you pull and gather the whole of the strip you actually form a constructed circle, which feels as though it comes back to the research that I've done for the playground. For project 4 I picked up on this idea and made a prototype, as we can see, and used a simple colour palette from some of the drawings that I'd done in my sketchbook and applied the same method of making. But with this gave me the idea that I wanted to put together approximately another 6 of this construction to make the shapes even larger and something larger to wear. The limitation of just the one piece, it allows you to apply it around the neck or wear it on the arm, still forms the idea of armour and still very playful with colour and tactility, but I wanted to develop it and take it one step further. Now I just wanted to make connections with another sample from an earlier project where I played with ideas of colour and sound, but also with the technical aspect, because I think the technical aspect of knit has a process in its making, either with the carriage and the needles when needles are working and non-working, but also as well I think it reflects that there's a lot of handwork that is entailed with making pieces. So even though I have just a single bed knitting machine, the technical possibilities are quite broad. So returning to this one piece where I'd worked with the ideas of sound and knitwear, I just wanted to demonstrate this with the colour palette but also with the technical knitting. And I think this is a prime example at this point to just clarify that when I use mixed media, my mixed media is always attached to the knitting so that it becomes part of the knitting and not an embellishment that is hand stitched in, because I do feel as though it's a possible excuse just to bring in the ideas of mixed media. I want the mixed media to have a purpose, and at the moment I'm working on the ideas of wearable mixed media so that then that they can be durable enough for the ideas of dance and performance. So moving on to this, I've taken elements of the colour palette and gone into making this particularly bold 3-dimensional piece. It's formed through its own process of making, and my biggest realisation of this piece for knit and the wadding, the mixed media that I've used, has made me realise how a piece of armour how weighty, how awkward the object could be, even though it's worn for a form of defence. Now, I continued with the idea of making holes, so there are holes within this piece that will allow a hand or an arm to be poked through the piece, and this will allow this to be attached to the body so that it can be worn to demonstrate a large scale piece of armour. As we can see, it's quite three-dimensional. You can see that the weight of it doesn't make it easy, and actually it is easier when working with a dressmaker's dummy to actually dress out and form a better shape because of the weight. But I would just like to demonstrate that the object, it is wearable. So once it is attached to the body, it still performs. The one thing that I did come across with this piece is, again, sometimes when using various plates for the tension, sometimes the knitting becomes a little bit too tight, and some of the panels became larger than others, and some of the tubes became slightly smaller. But I don't mind the fact that the whole unit has become slightly disconnected. As we can see, I can move and change the piece. I can put my arm through and I can reconstruct the shape. Again, I think this piece is going to work really well with the ideas of performance. And again, it could possibly develop into something that could be commercial. The other thing that I think I also like with my pieces that have become large scale are the fact that even just on their own, they could be pieces of art that could either sit on the floor or they could be attached to the wall. But I like the idea of the tactility and the touch. So I feel that the ongoing theme of play is still continuing with the connections of shape, form and colour from the Bauhaus, and making these pieces a piece of armour so that they are a defence or a defensive mechanism. So I think the filtering through is starting to come very natural, because the project of the theme with dyslexia and my creativity has become so important that I really want to push these ideas forward. One thing that I am liking, that I think does filter through, that I think once as a collection all of the pieces would be very different, and I think that they could possibly potentially make good pieces for a catwalk show to demonstrate that either they be fashion pieces or pieces of art to be worn, that they actually will perform on the body, with either it could be dance or any form of movement. But I think even just as an individual, we naturally want to change the shape of these objects. I would just also like to conclude, because I've been doing some quite intense research with the ateliers and the handcrafting. I've always been attracted to the front of my knitting, but I'm also particularly interested in the reverse side. And when we look at this piece in particular, which I will take some photographs of, the internal structure is quite complex. It was all hand stitched in and the cords pulled with the tension and attached. So the front is obviously slightly more finished, and then the inside is slightly more raw, and I have experienced this knowledge through watching documentaries with the ateliers, that the construction of these pieces, it makes them bespoke, it makes them luxurious because of the eye for detail and the hand stitching and the cutting. So I think I now have the full understanding of why some of these pieces are just a one-off. And possibly this is why that they are so expensive, because of the time that has been put into the piece. And this has made me realise, because this one piece alone took approximately 20 hours on and off to make. So I think I'm kind of very respectful for the fact that pieces of art also come with in energy and wanting the love and attention from the artist.